Madam Vice Chancellor, Canada's Governor General is an educator by profession and by instinct. It is therefore appropriate to honor him in this setting as he takes a special place among the 2016 graduates of Carleton University. In his recent book of letters to Canadians, His Excellency reveals his deep faith and humanity and reflects on his belief that, quote, education lies at the heart of everything that is good about life. His world, he writes, revolves around how men, women, and children gain, enlarge, and wield knowledge. He calls himself, above all, a teacher who has sought in the university and in society an open discussion of pressing national and international issues that is, in his words, founded on evidence, commanded by logic, and tempered by good sense. Growing up in Northern Ontario, His Excellency was determined to be educated and to educate himself. That determination, with an assist from hockey, took him to Harvard University, where he was twice selected an All-American and found himself on the verge of the National Hockey League. The Boston Bruins' loss was education's gain. Law degrees at Cambridge and Queen's universities and a career at 5 Canadian universities followed. He became Dean of Law at Western at the age of 33 and Principal of McGill when he was 38. From 1999 to 2010, the University of Waterloo thrived under his presidency. Along the way, he wrote more than 25 books and insisted on exercising his body as well as his mind. As Governor General of Canada since 2010, His Excellency has looked Canadians in the eye in every part of our country. He has challenged us to give our individual and collective gifts of time and talent as a means of honoring what we have and embracing what we have yet to do. His Excellency is the first to admit that this is a complicated and diverse country. The differences are there, he says, and they always exist in some form. Let's deal with them and overcome them. Better yet, rise above them. His Excellency returns always to education. He has championed the idea that Canadians of all ages, regions, incomes, and backgrounds must have access to an education that is consistently current, practical, and inspiring. Madam Vice Chancellor, in recognition of his successful career as an educator, brilliant leader of many post-secondary institutions, and his service to Canada as Governor General, I request that you confer the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, upon His Excellency, the Right Honourable David Johnston, Governor General of Canada.
Almost. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Faculty Senate and the Board of Governors, I hereby grant you the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereto pertaining.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chancellor, Chair of the Board, Chancellor, graduates, distingués invités, je suis très heureux de recevoir ce doctorat et je veux dire un grand merci à ma chère amie Roseanne, le chancelier, le conseil des gouverneurs et aussi le Sénat pour cet honneur. Et aussi de dire merci pour l'honneur que vous avez conféré sur ma femme Sharon. Nous sommes très touchants par cet acte de reconnaître les deux. I cannot tell you how touched Sharon and I are to receive together this remarkable honor from Carleton University and to be among the class of 2016. I was so appreciative of both citations, and especially the chronicle of Sharon's history, which is a little less known. And when I heard that term, resilience, I thought, she's a resilient lady. I was Sharon's first date in high school at age 13. We were married when she was 21, I was 22. She had 5 children before she was 29, 5 different obstetricians for 5 different babies, which is a bit of a challenge. And she has been my companion ever since. And in the position of, Darwin once said that it's not the strongest or the most powerful of the species that will survive, it's the most resilient. And Sharon's a resilient lady, and of course resilience is a hallmark of our time. But as the time that we have been in Rideau Hall, it really is a 2-person job, and she has brought so much to it, and for that reason, je suis ravi d'avoir la reconnaissance de ma femme aussi comme mon partenaire dans ce poste. Sharon spoke about truth and reconciliation in Canada. I'd like to speak a little bit about caring in a larger sense. When I was installed in this position about 5.5 years ago, the title of my installation address was A Smart and Caring Nation, a Call to Service, with 3 pillars: family and children, learning and innovation, philanthropy and volunteerism. And they all come together in the notion of caring. Sharon has expressed her caring, particularly with a focus on mental health. Yesterday at the Royal Military College, she was inducted as an honorary captain of the Navy. Pretty nifty uniform, I might say, as well. Attached to the Armed Forces unit responsible for military personnel, all of the military personnel and their family. And this will give her a great opportunity to expand upon her work with a focus on mental health. What I'd like to speak about today is the caring part of smart and caring. Both adjectives are important, but the caring part is the one that is a little bit undervalued, I think, and so essential to the kind of nation we dream of for Canada. Let me just speak of 2 terms and then tell you a couple of stories and finish. The first term is emotional intelligence. It's been defined as the capacity of individuals to recognize their own emotions and those of other people, to discriminate between different feelings and correctly label them, and to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior, usually in a very positive way. Intuitive thinking, or intuition, is the ability to acquire knowledge without inference or the use of reason. It comes from the Latin word intuere, meaning to consider or to contemplate. It's very important to me because on my coat of arms, the theme is contemplare meriarum, to think, to contemplate the better world. New York Times columnist and author David Brooks describes in his book, The Social Animal, the difference between the intuitive mind and the rational mind. Now, you're all experts on the rational mind. After all, you've completed a Carleton degree. But the intuitive mind, the mind that comes from the stomach and the heart, as well as the brain, is less explored, and we're learning more and more about it as we unfathom the mysteries of the brain. We understand about 1% of the brain. I learned yesterday from a neuroscientist psychiatrist at Carleton University, and imaging has helped us very much. And so it's that instinct, that capacity for caring that I want to emphasize today to each of you. And I'll tell just 2 stories. I won't use any props. We attempted props with one of them, and the water glass that I was using actually fell and water was everywhere, so I won't do it. But it begins with a professor of a first-year class. First day of the class, large number of students, and he comes in and he reaches the podium and he holds up a jar about this size. He says, "Is this jar empty or full?" "Oh, that jar is empty, sir," said the class. Then he proceeded to reach into a drawer and he pulled out a box with rocks. He poured the rocks in the jar up to the top. "Empty or full now?" "Oh, it's full now, sir." Second drawer, a box with smaller pebbles, sprinkled them in up to the top. "Empty or full now?" "Really full now, sir." Third drawer, an envelope of sand sprinkled in. "Empty or full now?" "Really full now, sir." reached to the bottom shelf and pulled up a can of Diet Coke, opened it up, poured it into the jar. Empty or full now? Really full now, sir. And then paused. Said, why am I doing this? Well, he said, lesson number one is critical thinking. When I first held up that jar, you said it was empty. It was in one sense, but it was filled with air. It wasn't a vacuum. And then with each of the other ingredients, there was a relative decision as to whether it was empty or full or not. So that's critical thinking, looking for all of the evidence necessary to come to an appropriate judgment. And use that critical thinking. That's the reasoning part of the brain, very carefully through your years here. But he said there's a larger lesson that I have in mind for you. That jar is sort of you in your life, here, first day, university, first class. And I can say to you, first day as you graduate from this university on a new journey. And the rocks are the really important things in your life. It's your sense of values. It's your moral compass. It's your ability to move from me to we, the first person singular, to the first person plural. And I got to tell you, when you do that, the world becomes a lot less lonely, a lot more joyful place. It's your own sense of how you contribute to the betterment of other people. Those are the rocks. The pebbles? Well, the pebbles are your responsibilities. If you have a job, not only do you show up on time, but you do everything expected and something more. If you're part of a team project, you're not the weakest member of the team. You're there pulling hard all the time. You attend to your responsibilities, whatever they may be, in a thoughtful fashion. Sand, that's just stuff. That's hanging around, that's bobbing and weaving, just putting in time, hanging out sort of thing. And what I have to say to you, said the professor, is be sure you get the rocks in your jar first, because if you fill it with sand, there's no room for the pebbles and no room for the rocks. And then he paused, good professor, waited for about 30 seconds until one venturesome young lady put up her hand and said, but sir, what about the can of Diet Coke? Ah, he said, that's just to remind you there's always time to sit down and have a cool drink with a good friend. The last story I want to leave you with on this notion of caring and that part of the brain that assimilates our instincts to help and to care comes from a story that took place in Montreal. In fact, I was in Montreal last evening and cited this very event. Mother Teresa was in Montreal about 25 years ago to speak at the Greater Montreal Prayer Breakfast. And a group of 50 or so of us gathered with her before the breakfast, and she made a brief presentation, and one of our neighbors said to her, Mother Teresa, we're so moved by your work. What can you do to help? By that time, I'd been a university rector of perhaps 10 years or so, Roseanne, and I expected she would say, well, send a large check to my shelter in Calcutta, India, and I assure you we'll do good work. She didn't. She said, look into your own neighborhood. Look in your own families. I guarantee you there is someone who needs your love and care. And then she gave a speech which was really quite remarkable on this theme of caring, from me to we. The next day, 4 Montreal newspapers carried the stories of her speech, each with an editorial, 3 of which were very laudatory. The 4th was the newspaper that was practicing, I guess, what they called realpolitik, seeing things as they really are and cutting past the kind of rosy overlay to the real truth. They said, look, this is a marvelous woman. She'll probably be canonized by her church, as she was some years later, but let's be practical. She operates a shelter for homeless people in Calcutta, India, about 250 people sheltered there. That's good work. But it's in a city of 20 million people, over half of whom live in destitute poverty, in a country of 1 billion people, the majority of whose lives are really quite wretched. What she does is good, but it's a mere drop in the ocean, a drop in the bucket in the relative scheme of things in the world of want. That bothered me for the longest time, this mere drop in the ocean, mere drop in a bucket, until I was at a birthday party by one of our neighbors, Andy McFarland, the Dean of Journalism at Western, and he had these 5- and 6- and 7-year-old kids mesmerized because he did magic. McFarland the Magnificent, dressed in a robe like this, top hat, mustache. He was doing coin tricks, and the kids were absolutely fascinated by how he could make the coin disappear and then reappear behind his ear. And then he came to his culminating act. He held up a glass of water and he said, I will turn this water into wine. I said, careful, Andy. The last time that was done 2,000 years ago was someone who had a little more authority than you have. Held up the glass of water, clear liquid, In his sleeve, he had an eyedropper with 1 drop of red vegetable dye. He dropped that drop into the glass. He held the clear liquid with that 1 little drop in it up before the children, said abracadabra, swirled it, and the clear water turned a beautiful shade of rosé. And I thought, there was the drop. Up to this point, I had been thinking of Mother Teresa's drop of care in physical terms or mathematical terms. I should have seen it as chemical engineering, because once that drop of red dye, that molecule interacted with all of the H2O molecules in that glass, it changed the contents of the glass, it changed the culture, and developed a culture of care. And that's, of course, what I'm saying to each of you, that each of our drops has to do with the culture in which we operate, and we change that culture to a caring culture. And so for 2017, our 150th anniversary, I guess my aspiration would be that we continue on the path of reconciliation with our First Nations and Indigenous people that Sharon has spoken about, and that all of us see caring, smart and caring, as Canadian characteristics that we want to see in our culture and develop as our legacy for generations to come. So let me say in closing, be kind to one another and be gentle on yourself. C'est un plaisir énorme d'être parmi vous comme diplômé Université Carleton. Merci.